Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Kimberly Guilfoyle Show live on Rumble, where facts come first and where news is done right. And today, the irony is thickening in New York, as the very attorney general who led a political witch hunt against President Trump now faces a criminal referral over allegations of mortgage fraud. The head of the Federal Housing Agency, Bill Pulte, this week sent a referral to the Department of Justice laying out the explosive evidence. Watch.
Prosecute the now President Trump in his second term. I just want to read a couple things. Criminal referral, then a response from James's office here in New York. James, for both properties listed above, this deals with real estate now, going back decades, really, appears to have falsified records in order to meet certain lending requirements and receive favorable loan terms, all right? Her office responded by saying the AG James is focused every single day on protecting New Yorkers. Specialist administration weaponizes the federal government against the rule of law and the Constitution. She will not be intimidated by bullies, no matter who they are. The issue here is what property she owned and whether or not she owned it, whether or not she was married, and whether or not her father was involved in all this.
That's right. Disgraced New York Attorney General Letitia James is now under scrutiny herself, facing serious questions about her own financial dealings and residency claims. And based on some of her recent behavior, she seemed to see through all the writing on the wall. Watch.
It's clear. I'm focused. I'm prepared. I'm ready. I've been trained by the best. I went to Howard University. That overturned legal segregation in this country. I've been taught in those classrooms where Thurgood Marshall once taught. I'm not afraid of no president.
Oh my goodness. Ay, ay, ay. All right. Well, meanwhile, President Trump is moving full speed ahead on getting this country back on track. Using tools like tariffs to put America first and protect our industries. This week, NVIDIA announced a $500 billion AI investment in a major move and a major win for America's chip-making capabilities. This is significant. And while President Trump focused on America's economic strength and security, where are some Democrats focusing their energy? Apparently planning a trip to El Salvador, apparently to track down an illegal immigrant from Maryland, who's tied to MS-13. And meanwhile, over at the Defense Department, Secretary Pete Hegseth is making it clear a new day of mission-ready defense is here.
They never get the applause. They never get the headlines. They never get the bright lights. They never get the microphone. No one's heard their story. No one's familiar with their story. One of the dumbest phrases in military history, our diversity is our strength. Our shared purpose is our strength. We are one DoD community committed to the same mission. We are American warriors.
Love that. And joining me now for reaction to this and much more, the founder of A Veteran Action and board member for the Article 3 Project, veteran Mark Lucas. Thank you so much for your service to this country. In fact, your continued service. That was a great ad, with that voiced over by our Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth. So thanks for being here with us today. Again, and I've got to start with this. If we can go with Letitia James, built her career largely or solely on targeting President Trump. Now she's facing a criminal referral for potential mortgage fraud herself. How damaging is this level of hypocrisy? And does it underscore the political nature of the attacks on President Trump?
Well, hi, Kimberly. Thank you for having me on. It is extremely damning. And when you showed that speech of her, she looked out of control. She doesn't look like somebody that you can trust. I'll put my old Article 3 Project hat back on. A3P's founder, Mike Davis, has had quite a bit to say about Big Tish, about Letitia James, and the lawfare that she leveled against President Trump. She was one of the biggest antagonists among many, like Fannie Willis and all of these Democrats who were trying to weaponize the judicial system against President Trump. And now she's using the same term, saying that she's going to stand up to President Trump as he attempts to weaponize his DOJ against her. I think the American people will see through this. I think the people of New York State will also see through this. This isn't just a one-off. There are multiple instances where she has falsified documents to receive better mortgage terms. I mean, this goes all the way back to her listing her father as her husband to get a reduced mortgage rate
Creepy.
years ago.
Yeah.
And then she's also got an apartment complex, I believe, in New York City, where she's listing it as only 4 units, was actually 5 to receive a reduced mortgage rate. And then this house in Virginia, she's claiming as her primary residence, although it's 300 miles away from her office in New York City. So there's a lot of evidence here that I think that Pam Bondi and the DOJ will be able to look towards. And I'll use her words against her. Tish James, nobody's above the law.
I love it. Yeah, and she certainly tried to abuse the law and weaponize it. So, given your work with Article 3 Project, what are the implications when a state's top law enforcement officer face such serious allegations? Could this be a turning point for accountability?
She needs to be held to a higher standard. We expect that from our public officials, but especially since she was putting President Trump under all of this scrutiny. I don't think the people of New York can trust her, but unfortunately, it's the state of New York. So we'll see if there's actual political ramifications. I think the mayor of New York City kind of said, hey, let's see how this plays out. I believe that the governor has her back, but this whole idea that it's her against President Trump just isn't going to stand up through scrutiny. It's her falsifying documents. So we'll have to see how this plays out, but it looks pretty damning to me.
No, you're absolutely right. And we see President Trump already laying the groundwork for strong trade policies. You, of course, are a top advocate for veterans. What does this economic news, mean for Main Street workers looking to see the economy, reoriented away from so-called globalism?
Well, I served in Afghanistan in 2010 and 2011. When I came back home, I was telling people in my state of Iowa that I viewed our national debt as our biggest national security threat, because I believe that we cannot fund and sustain the most lethal fighting force in world history if we don't stand on sound financial ground. So I look at our debt as a problem, and I look at President Trump's tariff strategy not just as an economic policy, but as a national security strategy. And that's why Veteran Action, we've been supporting President Trump's tariffs, because they will help us recoup investment in the United States and to rebuild this manufacturing capability that we lost. In World War II, our private industry, they pivoted in a major way, where car makers were making tanks. We focused airlines on building planes for the war fight. We had munition factories all across the country. Since World War II, since NAFTA and really bad trade agreements, we've lost our manufacturing base. We've lost skilled labor in the workforce. And if we, heaven forbid, have to face a serious world war, I fear that we don't have that domestic manufacturing capability to help fund that effort.
Yeah, that's a real problem. So I also want to talk to you about something I find very fascinating, which is, and disturbing at the same time, this reported Democrat trip, to El Salvador to find one individual while our own border is insecure. I mean, what does that tell you about their priorities and their grasp of the real issues facing Americans?
The Democrat Party is not putting America first. And you would think they would have learned from this historic landslide victory from President Trump. He won every single consequential swing state. He won the popular vote. And he won that race largely on immigration, largely on the border. We are starting to see that public opinion polling is heavily in support of President Trump's strategy to deport these violent criminals. So to see the senator from Maryland fly down there just shows that the Democrat Party is out of step. And I think they could face a very challenging midterm election. Now, the only people that could mess that up would be congressional Republicans. But I think if the Democrats continue down this track of doubling down on immigration, they're going to lose in the midterms.
And from your perspective, which is a unique one, with your background as a veteran and through Veteran Action, what more can we do to support our veterans? And I know Americans care deeply about this. It's one of the reasons also that they elected Donald Trump. Where do you think, in your assessment, that we are falling short? And, what are some of the things we can do to fix it?
Well, I built Veteran Action to support President Trump's America First foreign policy and his veteran agenda. And the reason why is I have never seen a greater champion for veterans and a commander-in-chief than President Donald Trump. I saw that in his first term. I volunteered to deploy to South Korea at the height of the crisis with Kim Jong-un. I saw President Trump's foreign policy on display firsthand. He walked us back from the precipice, and I thought that we were going to war. The only reason why I volunteered to go over there was I thought that we were going to face a major catastrophic war, and I wanted to get on the ground early to be able to help my unit. He was able to work with Kim Jong-un, and he was able to de-escalate that situation, which saved hundreds of thousands, if not millions of lives. And don't take my word for it. Look at the South Korean president at the time, President Moon Jae-in, who was not a conservative. A lot of the Korean soldiers I served with, they weren't a big fan of him. They thought he was liberal. But President Moon Jae-in said that President Trump deserved to win the Nobel Peace Prize for what he did on the Korean Peninsula. So we as veterans, we understand that President Trump has our back. He knows how to protect us from these forever wars. And his foreign policy is exactly what we need to benefit our veterans. And also, I saw what he did with the VA. I worked with President Trump to help pass two of the most historic reforms in the history of veteran health care. It was the 2017 VA Accountability and Whistleblower Protection Act, which would hold bad VA employees accountable. And he passed the Mission Act, which was to give veterans their choice in health care. So there's no better advocate for veterans than President Trump. And we are focused on policy and politics. We're not a veteran service organization. I'm not giving away wheelchairs to vets or building homes for homeless vets. Those are great things.
Yeah.
I am focused on building a smash mouth political organization to stand up for our veterans in Washington, and President Trump is the best vehicle to get that done.
Absolutely. Looking ahead, on all of these issues, Mark, what are the key battles you see in defending and ensuring accountability in the coming months?
We have the Access Act that's currently stuck in Congress. This is supposed to help veterans receive health care more quickly. Right now, there's these arbitrary requirements that you can drive you have to wait 30 or 20 days to get seen, or 30 miles, right? Or a 30-minute drive. And so those arbitrary requirements in order for a veteran to get seen, those aren't soon enough. If you're a veteran that's facing a mental health crisis, you shouldn't have to wait 20 days to be seen. You don't have days. You might not have hours. So we want to pass that and get that on the president's desk to provide more access to veteran health care. And we need to continue to support the reforms of the Department of Defense that Pete Hegseth is really moving forward. We need to be warfighter focused.
Yes.
We need to be able to root out the DEI. And Veteran Action, we've built action alerts where you can easily go on our website, veteranaction.org. You can contact your lawmakers, both in the House and in the Senate. You can tell them to support Pete Hegseth's reforms, and you can also tell them to support the Access Act to be able to provide veterans better choice in their health care.
Which is so important. I love how clearly you lay out the mission and the focus and what needs to be accomplished. And those other groups do great things to help veterans, but we have to have the policies, in place, political, protection, and a whole platform in order so that it's sustainable going forward when we actually make a big and deep difference.
And this is how we scale and help not thousands of veterans, but millions.
Millions.
Not just the veterans of yesterday or today, but in the future. And a big part of that is President Trump and his America First foreign policy to keep us out of these forever wars that ruin people and destroy lives. So that's like preventative health care to keep us out of those forever wars, but then also to pass this policy that will help people in the future. I'm telling you, Kimberly, this could scale and help millions of people in the future. And that's why Veteran Action, I've specialized in this type of political grassroots activity. At the Article 3 Project, we helped recruit tens of thousands of people, making over 100,000 actions to support President Trump's cabinet. It's the same system I built for A3P is what I have at the Veteran Action Center.
Yeah, it's very significant. It's important. And I love, once again, tell everybody, where they can find, follow you, get more information, and in any way help Veteran Action.
You bet. You can follow me on all the social channels at Lucas, Iowa, and also at Veteran Action. But our website, this is how you can really help people. Go to veteranaction.org. there's an action center where you can call your lawmaker, you can email them, you can post at them on social media. You can take all 3 of those actions in less than 5 minutes. And Kimberly, you'll remember us talking about this during the Hegseth confirmation. You'll get lawmakers who'll say, guys, make the call stop. Please, we get the point. We will not stop those calls until we accomplish the mission. So veteranaction.org is where you can take action.
I love it. I love it. And well done on that. And Pete's doing a fantastic job, and so are you. You're a great friend to this program and to the American people, and supporting the amazing men and women that have served this country and continue to answer the call. Thank you so much, Mark Lukes, for being on the program.
Thank you very much.
All right, and coming up, more on all the latest legal news. You don't want to miss it. But first, also be sure to check out the good folks over at the 1775 Coffee Company. We talk about it all the time. Don't compromise on taste, quality, or your values. And 1775 Coffee is brewed to perfection, crafted with precision, and built on patriotism. The farm-to-cut process means there is quality, authenticity, and sustainability from start to finish. All the beans are ethically and exclusively single-sourced. So why not try 1775 Coffee today? Go to 1775coffee.com/KG for 15% off your first order. And now we delve deeper into the escalating controversy surrounding Kilmar Abrego Garcia, the MS-13 linked illegal whose deportation has become a political flashpoint. While many headlines call him merely a Maryland man, the facts tell a far different story. And now the White House and Department of Homeland Security are forcefully pushing back, releasing documents that paint a far more troubling picture, including gang ties, domestic violence, and being in America illegally. But far left judges would rather ignore key facts and key law to continue their latest Get Trump witch hunt. As Judge Boasberg is now claiming he has probable cause to hold the Trump administration in criminal contempt for deporting this illegal immigrant out of the country. You cannot make this up, okay? Joining us now to sort all this out, senior legal fellow at American Path, former White House senior advisor, former counsel to the House and Senate Judiciary Committee, attorney Dan Huff. Thank you so much for being on the program.
Thank you for having me.
You can't even make this up. When you think about it, you go, wait, what is happening here? We're seeing this extraordinary situation, truly, where Judge Boasberg is threatening criminal contempt against Trump officials over the Abrego Garcia deportation. So constitutionally, how far can a district judge really go in trying to dictate foreign relations, and compel the executive branch like this? I mean, especially when it seems and appears to fly in the face of SCOTUS's own cautions and the president's inherent authority, executive power in this sphere.
So I think you're exactly right in pointing out that the president is at his highest authority, the apex of his authority when acting in foreign relations. We have to distinguish, though, between two sort of branches of the problem. One is substantively, did the judge have the authority to intervene and block the president? And I think here it's a very weak argument in terms of a judge's authority to get involved in foreign relations. However, there's a second piece, which is important. There's case law out there that says that the government is required, and anyone really, is required to comply with a court order, even if that order is wrong. And the reason for that is to just maintain sort of the credibility of the courts and the enforcement power of the courts. And that's what Boasberg is focused on. Because as you point out, the Supreme Court rejected him and said his injunction was wrong and reversed it and said he doesn't even have authority to hear this case in D.C. At the same time, what Boasberg is focused on is, okay, but government, you didn't listen to me in the meantime, and that was wrong, and that's how I'm going to get you. So I think that is where he's focused his time, and it's a little bit odd that he's choosing to die on this hill when the guy at issue is clearly like a bad hombre.
A bad hombre, I know, that never gets old. Your expertise in injunction bonds under Rule 65 C is crucial here. It seems that Judge Boasberg obviously completely bypassed the requirement for posting security, right? Which is very interesting. We've discussed a bond meant precisely for situations involving potential damages and high reversal risk, like ordering planes turned around. Can you explain the fundamental importance of this bond requirement? And our viewers are very fascinated by it, and how its absence here effectively, arguably renders the judge's entire order just procedurally, on a procedural basis, invalid and unenforceable.
Well, I'm so glad you brought that up because I feel like a bit about a broken record when I start talking about these things. But you're quite right that it's very,
so important.
very important here. And yeah, and in fact, this is exactly the situation that it's designed for. So, briefly to recall for your viewers, what Rule 65C of the federal rules, which governs how judges operate, says that plaintiffs, activist plaintiffs in particular, seeking injunctions have to have skin in the game. What does that mean? It means that they have to post bond to cover the government's cost of complying with the injunctions that they seek in the event that that injunction is later invalidated. And that's exactly what happened here, right? Judge Boasberg issues an injunction, turn around those planes, hold those people in custody. All that costs money. And what happened? It goes up to the Supreme Court and they completely invalidate the injunction. It shouldn't even, the case shouldn't even have been brought in DC. The judge has no authority to hear it. So what does that mean? Well, the government would have had to put up all these costs, pay all this money. How would they get their money back? They wouldn't. And that's the point of the rule. The rule deters frivolous litigation by saying if you lose, you've got to pay. Now, how would this have played out here? Well, to start with, Judge Boasberg was what should have ordered the people seeking that injunction, these illegal aliens, to post bond to cover the cost of the plane, of turning it around, of holding them. And that would have made them think, should I bring this case in DC? And the answer is no, because the habeas claims, and this is well known, have to be brought where the person's held, which here would be Louisiana. They didn't do it on purpose. It was forum shopping. They knew that they'd get a conservative judge in the Fifth Circuit down there. So they purposely ran to DC. Now, if they knew that that could cost them real money and that they would get an obvious reversal later because a habeas petition has to be filed where the person's being held, they probably would have thought better and never brought the case there. That's point number one. But point number two, the case law is clear that, well, I shouldn't say the case law. The rule is clear that an injunction can issue only if the plaintiff posts bond. Here, Boasberg did not order a bond. And as you said, that renders the injunction void ab initio. There was no authority for him to issue it. And that's important because I said earlier in the broadcast that there's case law that says you have to follow a court order, even if that court order is later found to be invalid. But this is different. Here, the order was invalid at the outset. It was never valid. That case law refers to a valid order enforcing what later turns out to be an invalid law. What we're talking about here is where the order itself was invalid. The injunction itself was invalid. Why? Because the judge did not follow the procedure required to issue it. And that is, I think, the best argument the government has right now. There is no case here to say that we should be held in contempt because there was no valid order for us to follow. We didn't violate anything because you never issued anything valid. So I think it's very important here, and I do hope that it's something that they're able to bring up.
I hope so. It's imperative, I think. Also, the administration appears to be, correctly interpreting the Supreme Court's specific language, arguing facilitate release from prison in El Salvador doesn't equate to a mandate to physically return Abrego Garcia to the United States, particularly given, the serious security concerns surrounding alleged MS-13 members. From an immigration and constitutional law perspective, why is that distinction so critical?
So you're quite right. And people need to look carefully what the Supreme Court said, because the district court had said you have to facilitate the release and effectuate the release and the return of this individual to the United States. The Supreme Court actually didn't say that. What the Supreme Court said was you have to take steps to facilitate his release in El Salvador and, provide him some of the same process he otherwise would have gotten. It did not say return him back to the United States. And I do think that's a distinction that has to be noted. Number two, it's important to understand the context here. This guy is really a bad hombre here, right? And more information is coming out over time as to the things that was actually done. People foolishly just took his lawyer's statements at face value. Oh, well, his lawyer said he's not a gang member, so I guess that settles it. I mean, not at all. And we see now the administration released information, more detail about, how he was caught, and the money he had on him and his associates and his gang symbols and so on and so forth. So the bottom line is that there's a much better case here than was initially thought. But the other point is the Supreme Court, when it said take steps to release him, it also said that the district court has to clarify its order. Because what was the scope? What did the district court intend by the scope of effectuate release? Why? The Supreme Court said it may exceed the scope of the district court's authority. In other words, the district court better explain what it means by facilitate his release, because they might be asking the government to do something it cannot do. And that's what you see here. If the district court is saying, get him back to America, what's the authority to do that? He's in the custody of a foreign power. And this is the point that the government was making. In fact, you saw just now President Trump sitting with the president of El Salvador, and he's saying, I'm not going to release him. So what are we supposed to do now? Start a nuclear war to get one person back who's an illegal alien? The last point I'd say about that is this guy, he was ordered deported. He was denied asylum. What he has was an order that says he cannot be deported to El Salvador. It doesn't say he can't be deported anywhere, right? And so what ought to happen here is that he ought to be, if they have to do anything, they should send him to another country, not the United States. Under no circumstances should he come back to the U.S. And that's what the attorney general said.
Absolutely right. Under no circumstances. And they try and do it, like send him back again. Honestly, it's ridiculous. Yeah. And I mean, just the report is just so bad. With the ex-wife, Ms. Vasquez, it talks about the domestic violence and the horrors that she experienced at his hands. The guy's an MS-13 gang member. Like, what is going on here? And Van Hollen's running around like a chicken with his head cut off, trying to, get this guy. It makes just no sense to me. And it's like they have no platform, no idea, no whatever. So they're hanging their hat on something that's, unconstitutional, illegal on its face, violates every due process. But also, how much of this boils down to a separation of powers issue? How does this specific clash, with the judge demanding actions related to a foreign nation where they have no authority or jurisdiction, and the executive branch pushing back, highlighting the critical, need to respect the distinct roles, separation of powers, assigned to each branch by the Constitution, particularly regarding foreign affairs.
Yeah, I mean, you're exactly right. That's the core of the issue, I think, in all of these cases. And it's very rare in any negotiation for one side to have all the leverage. So right now you're talking about contempt citations that Boasberg's looking at, that this other judge in the case of the illegal alien they're trying to bring back is considering. Well, how would that actually play out? Okay, let's say Boasberg or the other judge finds the government in contempt. What happens? Well, there's civil contempt and there's criminal contempt, and there's an order that you have to pay, you have to go to jail. So who enforces that? Well, the U.S. Marshals enforce that. And the U.S. Marshals are within the Justice Department. So is the Justice Department going to go enforce a judge's order that's probably unconstitutional to start with, to put a government official in jail for doing something the administration agrees with? And even if that were true, the president has authority to pardon criminal contempt. Civil contempt is a different question. But the point is that there is a clash on the executive branch between branches, and that's sort of exactly the point. Neither side has all the leverage. The court, those judges might think, I'm going to issue a contempt order, I'm going to show the government. But at the end of the day, who's going to enforce that other than the executive branch? And because there's sort of a weakness in both sides have to act reasonably. And I think what you see here is that the judges are acting totally unreasonably. They're operating at the edges of their authority, beyond their authority, and they have to think very carefully about whether this is a fight they want to start. Because at the end of the day, if they issue a contempt order and that's ultimately not followed through with, they've lost all their power. So there is a clash of the branches, and I think that each side is cognizant of its strengths and weaknesses, and in sort of an earlier time, that would lead to a reasonable resolution. Whereas here, I think you have these activist judges, they're so anti-Trump, they're so anti-administration, that they're going well beyond where they ought to be, and they may wind up regretting it because they're going to bring real disrepute on the judicial system.
Ultimately, how do you see this, resolving? Meaning not just how you think it should or want it to resolve, what do you really think is going to happen?
Well, I still actually am hopeful that they can dodge this with the injunction bond argument. And that's actually a very clean way for make this all to make the whole thing go away. And sort of no one's ox was gored. everyone kind of preserves their integrity here. It's just the issue, the order was invalid at the outset. That would help for the Boasberg case. You got a separate issue with the person mistakenly, quote unquote, mistakenly deported. There, I think, again, one possible resolution would be simply to transfer the person to a third country, never coming back here, and that would sort of satisfy all sides. What you have seen is that the Supreme Court is very hesitant to come in and resolve these interbranch disputes. And I think they're really looking for a way out here. So I would say what's probably, my guess is that that you don't see a return of Obrego from El Salvador. The president of El Salvador, he doesn't want to see that. I think it's very hard to argue that the U.S. government can compel that, all right? So I don't think that happens. Maybe he goes to a third country. Hopefully, I don't think he comes back to the U.S. The question of the contempt, I think that ultimately that's going to get thrown out on appeal. I think he'll probably find the government in contempt because that's just the direction Boasberg's been heading. But again, the appellate courts are not eager for a confrontation, and I think they will find a grounds to make it go away.
Yeah, well, I think it's very interesting. And this is a very important precedent, I think. We have to make sure that he's, not returned, that does not happen. But let's just also give kudos and credit where credit is due to this amazing cooperative relationship that we have with Nayib Bukele, the president of El Salvador. That was a fabulous meeting. I was there for his inauguration, both of those guys. And he's just an unbelievably smart, highly intelligent individual, great world leader. And the way that he is working with us and really to solve this problem, it's so, so good. I'm thrilled with the whole thing.
I completely agree with you. I'm a huge fan of his, and it really is fantastic the way he's been acting. And the biggest thing is people in America have been talking about how do we solve the criminal problem for so long. He solved it. El Salvador had the highest murder rate in the world, and then he came in and he cleaned it up and he put all these bad guys in jail. And I believe that the murder rate now is the lowest in the world.
Yes.
And
it was the highest. Number one homicide rate worldwide. Wow.
Right. And you always hear these left-wing people saying, well, you can't arrest your way out of the problem of crime. No, clearly you can. He did it. He literally did it. He arrested his way out of the problem. So don't tell us that you cannot arrest your way out of the problem of crime. Now, maybe, he had to cut some corners that we wouldn't want to cut, but the bottom line is he did it and it works. And that's a very important bottom line for people to remember. People are so much safer now in El Salvador than they ever have been. You're probably safer in El Salvador 100%. Than you are in New York City.
I felt very safe there, let me tell you. It's really good. So I just hope, I hope they follow the law, the procedures, the Constitution. We established this important precedent so that we don't have to go through this again. But can you imagine, wow, so insane, the just misdirected focus and fighting for an MS-13 gang member who's here illegally, who beat his wife. And that's the priority of the Democrat Party. It makes no sense to me, but you, Dan Huff, make a lot of sense. We love having you on the program. Tell everyone where they can find you.
So you can follow me on X at @RealDanHuff, and I love being on this program. Thank you for having me. We need to keep doing this as much as possible before you head off to Greece.
Yes, I know. You're absolutely right. Absolutely right. Okay, excellent. Thank you so much. Again, a pleasure, and happy Easter to you and your family.
Thanks. You too.
All right. And my closing remarks just ahead. But remember, free speech is under attack and Rumble refuses to back down. We have always believed in empowering independent voices, and now Rumble is taking it to the next level. We are excited to offer Rumble Premium, a completely ad-free experience with exclusive benefits for viewers and creators. And it's more than a subscription. It is a stand for free speech. Your voice matters. So, today, why not? Join Rumble Premium. For a limited time, you can get $10 off an annual plan using promo code, you guessed it, KG10. So just visit rumble.com/premium/KG10. You can claim your discount today. Get after that $10 off. Again, that's rumble.com/premium/KG10. In closing, the contrast couldn't be more clear. While President Trump plans to restore American strength through decisive action on trade and the economy, those who attacked him are facing their own scandals. And others in the Democrat Party seem lost in distractions instead of addressing real problems. The hypocrisy of figures like Letitia James is a reminder of the political games played at the expense of justice, while the misplaced priorities show a deep disconnect from the needs of ordinary Americans. It is time for leadership that focuses on accountability, economic prosperity, and putting mainstream first. Thank you so much for joining us today. Please be sure to download the Rumble app, subscribe to my channel, turn on notifications, like and share, and tell all your friends so they know exactly where to find us. And please also be sure to follow me across all platforms: X, Truth Social, Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. Stay tuned to Rumble for all the very latest breaking news coverage. And please don't miss Don Jr.'s big show live at 6 p.m. Eastern tonight. I hope you have a blessed and very happy Easter. I'll talk to you all again very soon. God bless.